world is in a volatile situation, with conflicts kicking off on almost every continent. While many of these nations stick to ground warfare, the biggest superpowers lean heavily on their aerial power. As the saying goes, he who controls the sky controls the battlefield. With that said, these are the 10 strongest air forces in the world, countries that should rather be avoided unless you are willing to fight in the skies. And this is not only about numbers, but also the tech advantages some nations have over others. Keep in mind that drones have not been used for this list. First on this list is the French Air Force, which coincidentally happens to be one of the world's greatest nuclear powers. In recent years, the French government has invested significant funds in revitalizing and building its military, potentially even working together with the likes of Germany in producing the EU's first fifth-generation fighter. With approximately 976 aircraft available for use, split between fighters, cargo, and bombers, the French Air Force might not be one of the strongest in the world, but there is no doubt that Paris has more than enough firepower to at least keep the rest of NATO at bay. Thanks to its Mirage 2000 fighters, which are now seen in Ukraine, the French have built up quite an advanced air force. The introduction of the Dassault Rafale also played a massive role in bringing the French Air Force up to modern standards, but unfortunately, Paris will still end with a bloody nose if they go toe-to-toe with the next country on this list. Turkey is one of the most underrated countries in the world, especially when it comes to combat power. With more than 350,000 troops and over 600 fighter aircraft, the Turkish Air Force certainly makes a claim for the strongest air force in the whole of Europe. With approximately 1,100 aircraft, split between fighters, bombers, and cargo, Turkey can quickly reach any target within its sphere of influence. Its major claim to fame is the various models of F-16s, originating from the United States. However, it has recently been announced that the Turkish government is working on the Khan, a fifth-generation stealth fighter that could perhaps rival the F-22. Moreover, Turkey serves as one of the countries where the United States has deployed some of its nuclear weapons, and being under the umbrella of NATO certainly helps to make Turkey a force to be reckoned with. Reports suggest that Turkey has a decent force of at least 33 squadrons operating this wealth of aerial power. Japan might not be considered one of the strongest air forces for attack, but since the country is mostly focused on self-defense, the Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, JASDF, should not be underestimated. Unfortunately, Japan operates just over 700 aircraft, which should technically not even put them in the top 10. However, a deeper look reveals exactly which aircraft is currently operated by the JASDF. The F-15 Strike Eagle still plays a major role in the Japanese Air Force, but its recent acquisitions of the US F-35 completely changed the scope of battle. Since these aircraft are designed to shoot other fighters out of the air before even being noticed, it gives Japan a massive edge over countries with large yet old aircraft. For example, Turkey might have more fighters, but when it comes to technology, Ankara might need to speed up the development of its brand new fifth-generation fighter. It is very similar to the next nation on the list. Israel is very similar to Japan, only operating about 600 military aircraft. However, an outright battle with Israel would make it almost impossible to win. Aside from its defensive capabilities through the Iron Dome system, the IAF fields some of the most advanced aircraft the world has ever seen. Much like Turkey and Japan, the F-16 Fighting Falcon and F-15 Strike Eagles are still a very important part of the Israeli Navy. But once again, Israel fields a big contingent of US-made F-35s, which is largely considered the most advanced and powerful fighter jet the world has ever seen. Moreover, Israel is fully supported by the United States, and despite never acknowledging this, Israel is also considered a nuclear superpower. Finally, the Israeli Air Force works very closely with Mossad, which has proven time and again how they can change the tide of the war. In fact, Israel wiped out the entire Egyptian Air Force in just a couple of minutes as the Six-Day War was about to kick off. Nevertheless, the IAF is not a force you'd like to face in any war, and despite the latest in anti-air defenses housed by Iran, Israel still managed to inflict enormous damage back in 2024. Perhaps it is far better to simply just stay away from conflict with Israel. The RAF is perhaps the most well-known and historically significant air force the world has ever seen. What makes the RAF special is the fact that it is arguably the oldest air force in the world, which has been at the forefront of global design and tech advancements. Well, this was until the United States took over, but we'll get to them in a second. The RAF operates roughly 670 aircraft, ranging from modern jets to older cargo aircraft. However, its biggest claim to fame is the Eurofighter Typhoon, a multinational 4.5 generation fighter, which is arguably even more powerful than the F-16. Moreover, the United Kingdom is also a nuclear superpower, with the means of dropping ordnance via the air. Thanks to its aircraft carriers, the Royal Navy also has a contingent of fighters that can be lobbied in case of any conflict. Nowadays, the RAF operates the F-35 Lightning II, which is perhaps the most efficient and advanced fighter jet the world has ever seen. Add the C-130J and A-400M Atlas to the mix, and you have a perfectly balanced air force, backed up by one of the strongest intelligence organizations the world has ever seen. In recent memory, the RAF have been active in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and Libya, playing support roles. But should the United Kingdom ever go to war, you can be sure that the RAF will be a formidable force. Perhaps Air Force power is the only thing the French are yet to take from the UK. With about 720 operational aircraft, the South Korean Air Force is one of the most powerful the world has ever seen. To beat the UK, Turkey, and France is no small feat, especially given the fact that all three of these nations are nuclear superpowers. However, South Korea just pips all three. Most of its air force consists of U.S. fighters, including the KF-5EF, F-16C, F-15K, F-A-50, and F-35A, which have all been designed in the USA, while being slightly modified when they arrived on South Korean shores. However, its biggest advantage is the use of the F-35, and despite it not being the more advanced F-35B, the A version is still highly capable and will wipe out nearly any other fighter in units. Well, that is only if the F-22 doesn't arrive on the battlefield. Furthermore, the South Korean Air Force is closely tied to the United States, running numerous training operations and being trained by the most advanced Air Force currently in the world. But South Korea doesn't stand a chance when we look at the top 4 air forces in the world and the level of power they can wield at the drop of a dime. India might not show its power and often choose to rather take a stance of neutrality. No one truly knows what is brewing inside the country with the biggest population on Earth. India plays a critical role